me start recording here because we're at 7:04. So what we're doing today is monorepos. It is one thing to check off from the things we have to do. It's not very important to know because this is usually handled by the dev tooling guy of the team. The full stack engineer just has a monorepo and they have to add more code changes to it. The real sort of person who needs to know all of this is if you're the dev tooling guy of the company. What is the dev tooling guy? The person who builds a lot of tools for the developers so that the developers are productive and fast. So that's a high level of who needs to learn monorepos in depth. But even if you are not the dev tooling engineer, as a full stack engineer as well, a few concepts we'll touch on today will help you navigate monorepos slightly better. In case you ever are faced with a repository that has monorepos, or you want to create monorepos of your own. For us, if you've gone through the code base of app.100xdevs.com, this does not use monorepos. If you've gone through the daily code base, this does use monorepos because this has a separate front end and backend versus CMS has a single front end and backend. So it doesn't need a monorepo. What is a monorepo? We will discuss very soon. Let's get right into it. Projects.100xdevs.com. The track is called Turbo Repo and Monorepo. There is a big difference between two of them. Initially, when I learned Turbo Repo, I thought it's a monorepo framework. And slowly I realized it's a little bit more than that. In fact, it's not a monorepo framework. That's what we'll discuss today. So there are two separate things to learn. Turbo Repo and what it does, and what are monorepos. Give you guys 20 seconds. Projects.100xdevs.com. And open this track in case you want to follow along, copy some code snippets. Going to paste it in chat as well. And let's kick things off in the next 5 seconds. 4. All right. Cool. Let's begin with what are monorepos. The name is pretty self-explanatory. Mono repository. It means a single repository where you should probably put all your code base, be it your backend, front end, DevOps, some external process you might be hitting, whatever code you have, put it in a single repository. This has been argued on for a while. Okay, whether you should have multiple repositories, backend 1, front end React. You should have multiple repositories of your projects, or should you have a monorepo? Both sides have a lot of arguments, but what has eventually won is a monorepo, which means most companies, most code bases that you will look at will have all of their code base in a single GitHub repository. They will not have multiple GitHub repositories. They will have a monorepo. As the name suggests, a single repository on GitHub, let's say, but could be on GitLab, could be on your local machine. The point is everything is in a single folder that holds all your front end, back end, DevOps, other type of code. A few examples of this include, if you look at the daily code website, if you open this GitHub link, you will see at the top it has apps and packages. It has 2 folders. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, if you open apps, you will see it says the backend is here and the web or the front end, the Next.js code is here. So I've put all of my backend and front end code in the same repository. There are a bunch of other things in this packages, which we will eventually discuss. But this is one example of a place where front end and backend is in the same repo. Another example is cal.com. If you open the code base of cal.com, here also you will see packages and apps, which is something commonly seen across monorepos. Deploy and infra is something extra. They have their infrastructure code, I'm assuming. Here as well, I haven't opened these folders. Purely on the name, I'm guessing. This probably has their infrastructure code also that deploys their code to their infrastructure. That's my guess. Here, this is the only structure. Okay, apps is there, packages is there, and will we always see this? No, some monorepos might have everything in the top level folder, backend, front end, depends on the convention. This is a very popular one. Apps and packages is a very popular convention. Okay, bhai, you will at least have these 2 folders, and this will have your top level applications. What do I mean by top level applications? Front end React code, backend Express code, front-end Next.js code will usually be here. Then Harkirat, what is packages? We'll see very soon. That's a high level of monorepos. Do you need to know it as a full stack engineer? Not really. Most of the times it's already set up by the DevTools guy, but good to know, and good to know how to set this from scratch as well. A lot of times you don't have to set this up from scratch. It's already there. For example, this code base already has it. You just have to find the right folder and make your changes there. Slide number 2. Why even monorepos? As I said, why not simple folders? Why, Harkiyat, why are you introducing this concept of a monorepo? Why can I not, do something like this? Okay, bhai, I have a top level folder that says Golang code, top level folder that says Node code, React code, front end code, back end code. What does a monorepo give us? I'll share what a monorepo will give us eventually, but this is something you might think of from first principles, right? Okay, it's a monorepo. I'll put everything in the same top level folder. We're good to go. You can do that. Why can't I just store everything in a top level folder? You can, and you should. If your services are highly decoupled, if they don't share any code, then totally no need for a monorepo framework. No need to even use the word monorepo. Put everything in multiple folders. You are good to go. Services don't depend on each other. If, there is a Golang code in your repository and a Node.js code, of course, you cannot import anything from here to here or vice versa, which is why it makes sense. 2 top level folders, that is technically your monorepo. But if your code is shared, if your project looks something like this, don't get overwhelmed. Just try to understand, very slowly. Okay, if you have a React frontend and a Node.js backend, and let's say a Cloudflare serverless backend code as well. Ignore this for now, ESLint. Some deployment code as well that, deploys your code to Docker Hub, EC2, S3, Cloudflare. This also feel free to ignore. If you want just the first 3, if you have 3 of these things, there's a very high probability, okay, they will all need to share some code. If you remember the medium assignment, over there, the front end and the back end shared the Zod types from a common module. Over there, we were not using monorepos, which is why we had to push this common over to NPM and pull from NPM to these 2 independent front ends and back ends. If you don't remember this, it's fine as well. But if you go to the medium assignment, it might ring some bells. If you have a structure like this, where all the code is in, let's say, Node.js, and there is some code sharing that needs to happen, that is where monorepos are super useful, successful, needed. Shared code reuse, enhanced collaboration. If multiple developers are working, together, they can see each other's code base at all times. Optimized CI/CD pipelines. Now we don't know what CI/CD is, so this might just go over your head, which is fine. But I'll just give you a brief of what this means. It basically means if you push your code to GitHub and you are using a monorepo, that code going from GitHub to your EC2 server can be really quick. Not going, but building. Quickly take you through this point. If this is your GitHub repository and you make a commit to this GitHub repository, you send some code change over here. There is something called CI/CD, which stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment. The name itself says continuous deployment, which means if there is a code change that comes here, somehow GitHub pushes this code change over to an AWS server. We'll see eventually how this happens. But that's what CD specifically means, continuous deployment. A code change happened, a commit happened, commit reached EC2 Vercel someplace. You can speed this up by a lot by using something called remote caching, which we might or might not eventually discuss, which is another benefit of using monorepo frameworks. Not exactly monorepo frameworks, turbo repo specifically. But this is another benefit. You won't see this very soon unless and until we reach a very advanced concept of remote caching. And centralized tooling and configuration, which basically is this thing right here. We haven't introduced ESLint, which is why I told you to ignore this specific box over here. But ESLint is something that lets you, as the name suggests, lint your project. What does lint mean? It means making the code cleaner, making sure there is right tab spaces everywhere, making sure there are single quotes everywhere and not double quotes, things like these. And you can have that for all of your projects in a single place. That's another benefit of using monorepos. The biggest one, code sharing amongst front-end and back-end codes. That's the biggest benefit of using a monorepo versus, throwing everything in a top level folder. Are we good to go? Do we understand this? Do we have at least some intuition of why you need monorepo frameworks? 83%, 82%, 81%. Q&A I have opening for just 1 minute. CI/CD is like versatile deployment. Yes. Let's say there is a backend front-end code in a single repository in GitHub, but the backend is hosted in different server, front-end in different server. This is also called monorepo with GitHub hooks. Yeah. What is a monorepo? Single place where everything is there. But if something technically this is also a monorepo, right? If there is a Go code, Node code, not sharing everything, single repository has multiple modules, it is a monorepo. But what is really a monorepo? That lets you share code amongst themselves, that lets you import one place to another, one module in another module. Could you give an idea of, okay, no, not right now. Next.js already has everything in one place. So why do we need monorepos? Next.js does not have Cloudflare workers. Next.js does not have WebSocket support. There might be a lot of processes that Next.js doesn't support. You might have a finicky developer who's like, bro, I will not write backend in Next.js. I will write backend in Express. So just because Next.js does it does not mean you might not have a service in the future that Next doesn't support. So you always, yeah, I mean, that's a decentish point. Next has everything, but Next doesn't have, for example, deployment scripts. That is something you might need in your single repository. Next.js is not a monorepo. It is a front-end and back-end framework. It is not a monorepo. I get that bhai, it does both the things. No, it just does one thing. Next.js thankfully can return HTML and JSON, which is why it's technically feels like it's a monorepo, but it's not. Folder in the sense locally. Yeah, you could say folders either locally in your VS Code or even on a GitHub project. If the folders are kept together in a top level folder, if this is your top level, or the better example was cal.com codebase, or even daily codebase, as I said, the code over here is in not a top level folder, but one folder below it, backend and web. If you open this, what is this? This is a Next.js application. It has all your app/page.tsx. If I go to app/backend, assume it has Express code. This does not have Express code. It's a different backend, but assume it has your Express code. Can we create a monorepo using a tool like Next? You can use NX. TurboRepo isn't exactly a monorepo framework, but yeah, you can use NX. Revise why monorepo. Why monorepo? There are 4 points written here. At least first one to we understand. Okay, shared code usage. I can, if I did not have a monorepo, then my GitHub would have one repository called daily code frontend. It would have another repository called daily code backend. And if they ever want to share code, how will they do it? When I will open my Visual Studio Code, what will it have? It will either just have the front end or just have the backend. There will be, I cannot import the backend code here, right? If they are in separate repositories, but if they're in the same repositories as various top level folders, front end, backend, somehow I can import them using, that's exactly what a monorepo lets you do, right? It lets you import one module inside another module. So this common module here is being used by React frontend, a Node.js backend and other places. That's the one big reason you want to use a monorepo. You can be like, Harkiyat, I will not use a monorepo. That's exactly what we did in the Medium assignment. We had one separate repository that has front. We did not have a separate repository, but we could have a separate front-end repository. This is, for example, stored on github.com/frontend or whatever, Harkirat/frontend. We had a separate backend repository. Call it github.com/harkirat/backend. And then we can have a separate third repository called common/common. And then we pushed this code over to NPM. If you remember the Medium assignment. And then from NPM, we pulled at 100x devs/common module here. And from NPM, we pulled the same thing here. So as you can see, for me to be able to share code, from a common repository, I had to push it to NPM, the node. I had to make a library like Express and push it over there, then use that library in both my places. Versus if I use a monorepo, all of them exist in the same top level folder. I can simply be like, by import from / common. Of course, that's not how you import the common module, but you can just be like, by import something from / common. So you can, in your local computer itself, use other modules rather than, pushing them to npm and pulling them from there. One big use case. Enhanced collaboration, very high level use case. Everyone is looking at the same repository. Front end people have some idea of the backend code. Backend people have some idea of the front end code, because everything is happening on the same repository. They can look at everyone's pull request and follow along. And then a bunch of other things. Like, feel free to ignore point 3 and point 4. We can, they're not very big benefits, and definitely not benefits that will help you build intuition of why you need monorepos. %92 is great. So let's proceed. I hope you have a high level idea of what a monorepo is. It's a place where you shove all of your front end, back end code or other types of code. Common monorepo frameworks in Node.js. So at some point, people realized, okay, you need this architecture won't work. Okay, you push everything to npm and pull it from there. You have to make it slightly cleaner for various projects to share code. And hence a bunch of frameworks were introduced. Lerna is the most, I don't know if it's the OG one, but this was the one that first introduced me to monorepos. One of my companies so before my very first company I joined, there was this debate on whether you should have it in a single repository or multiple repositories. Very small startup. Then I joined a big company. There I saw, okay, there's something called a monorepo, and that is the standard to follow. You want to have a single repository where code is stored. They were using Lerna, but eventually, slowly, TurboRepo has sort of become very popular. TurboRepo is not a monorepo framework. Lerna is a monorepo framework. NX is, and Yarn or npm workspaces is another popular monorepo frameworks. Turbo isn't a monorepo framework. It's something else. But if you use TurboRepo, it sets up either Yarn workspaces for you, or if you want Lerna or NX for you, depending on what monorepo framework you want to use. TurboRepo lets you choose it. So if you tend to go with TurboRepo, under the hood, it will use either npm workspaces or Yarn workspaces or something else. It will give you something on top. So if you today, someone asked for dark mode. If you today say, okay, bhai, I'm going to use TurboRepo as my framework for doing monorepos, under the hood, this will still use, most probably today what we'll do, it will use something called npm workspaces. And this is a monorepo framework. Harkirat, then why do we need TurboRepo? It has some other benefits. You don't need TurboRepo for doing monorepo stuff. You need it for something else. You need it, if you have a monorepo, it makes a lot of things really fast, which is why you need this project called TurboRepo. Everything else that you see here lets you create monorepos. Do we understand this? I think little too up and down this went. But the thing to learn is, okay, you don't need TurboRepo. This framework is enough to create a monorepo. It's enough to have multiple modules that can share code. So is this. So is this. But what should you learn? You should probably learn TurboRepo, because it puts monorepos on steroids and under the hood still uses one of these two. Do we understand this much? Of course, we'll understand it a little bit more as we start to write code. Even if you don't understand this slide, it's fine. The thing to learn is, the biggest thing to learn is just this line. Okay, we are going to use TurboRepo, which is, if you want to, for now, it's a monorepo framework. Just like Express is a framework for writing backend HTTP servers, monorepo helps you create, TurboRepo, name itself says turbo repo, which means giving powers to a repository, lets you create monorepositories. We'll be going through TurboRepo today since it's the most relevant one and provides more things and more optimizations that others don't. If you look at the one-line pitch for TurboRepo, it says high performance build system for JavaScript and TypeScript code bases. We'll see what this statement means very soon. So what are we learning today? Turbo repo. That's the framework we are learning. Just like we had a class on Express, a class on React. Today's class is on this thing called Turbo repo. History of Turbo repo is mildly interesting because of the success it had. It was made by someone called Jared Palmer, and it got acquired in 2021 by Vercel. There is a mild speculation this is a very big deal, some $10 million-ish deal, which a friend told me who's very close to Vercel, and they've built a bunch of products. Turbo repo is the sort of most used one. They're experimenting with a few more things, but Vercel has a smaller team inside now that handles this specific project called Turbo repo, built by this guy. Now comes a slightly better introduction of this slide, where I said that bhai, this is not exactly a monorepo framework. We need to understand what is a build system, what is a build system orchestrator, and what is a monorepo framework. Three jargons we need to understand: build system orchestrator, and monorepo. If we understand them, then we might be able to understand the difference between Turbo repo and the rest of the things that I've mentioned here. Let's start with the simplest one. The simplest one is a build system. We have used these in the past. Can you guess what a build system is? I'll give you a hint. TypeScript or TSC, the TypeScript compiler, is a build system. It builds JavaScript from your TypeScript code. Vite, the thing that we have used to start React projects, is a build system. It converts your TypeScript React TSX files over to a minified JavaScript file. A build system automates the process of transforming source code written by developers into binary code executed by computers. The thing about JavaScript is you never create binary code, but in C++, if you're writing C++ code, then if this is your C++ file over here, you convert this, it goes through a compiler or what you can call a build system, and what comes out is a binary file, right? Which has zeros and ones. And then you run this specific file on your machine. In context of JavaScript, for JavaScript and TypeScript project, this process, what the build system does, can include transpilation, which means converting TypeScript code into JavaScript code. TSC, the TypeScript compiler that we've used many times now to convert TypeScript code to JavaScript code. Bundling, which means combining multiple JavaScript files into smaller files. If you remember, when we created a React project, we had, if this is a React project, it had a bunch of components inside. App.tsx, user.tsx, signup.tsx, so on and so forth. But if I ran npm run build, the dist folder only had a single JavaScript file, asset-some random hash.js. So it converted a bunch of TypeScript code into a single minified JavaScript file. That is another thing a build system lets you do. Here, what was the build system? It was Vite. If I write a TypeScript project which has index.ts, common.ts, db.ts, so on and so forth, and something converts this to a bunch of JavaScript files, that something is also a build system. Index.js, common.js, db.js. If you want, you can also tell the build system here, TypeScript here, कि भाई only spit out a single file and minify it as well. It doesn't matter on the server because this code only resides on the server. So you don't optimize for this being a small minified file. But in case of React, you want the build system to spit out a very small JavaScript file. So the build system needs to minify the code as well. In case of a simple backend application, the build system only needs to convert TypeScript to JavaScript. So that's what a build system is. What are the good examples? Vite is a good example, and TSC is a good example for the JavaScript world. For the C++ world, G++, the compiler of C++ is a good example of a build system. Next, let's understand monorepo framework. Then we will move on to build system orchestrator. We understand build system. Let's understand what is a monorepo framework. A monorepo framework provides the tools for managing projects that contain multiple packages within a single repository. Monorepo. This includes dependency management, which means if one package depends on another, and workspace configuration, which feel free to ignore for now. So a monorepo framework has nothing to do with a build system. A monorepo framework is like, bro, I am going to allow you to create a common module, a backend module, a front-end module, and I will let you import things from this common module here. I will let you import things from this backend module here as well. So this is something a monorepo framework lets you do. It basically lets you do something like this: import some Zod type from common, let's say, without writing, / common. You can do this as well, but a monorepo framework makes these imports slightly cleaner and lets you, import things from one module over to another module without pushing them to NPM. That is what a monorepo framework lets you do. Two things we've understood. What is a build system? What is a monorepo framework? Very theoretical class this one's going, but we'll start to write code very soon. And once you write the code, you'll see this is like fairly simple stuff. We're going a little too deep into theory here. I don't know why, but let's do a quick poll. Do we understand these two things? Do we understand monorepo framework does something? People share code. When we write the code, we'll understand that better. And build system, do we understand? Okay, good, pretty good. 86%, good, not great. But let me take you to the third one here as well, and then we'll see what to do next. Turbo repo, as I said, turbo repo is something special. There were Lerna, there was NX, there was Yarn workspaces. These were already there, and none of them got acquired by by Vercel. So what exactly did turbo repo do? How did it provide something on top of these things so that this became very popular? And the answer is that turbo repo is a build system orchestrator. Turbo repo acts more like a build system orchestrator rather than a direct build system. It doesn't directly perform tasks like transpilation, minification, or running tests. Instead, it allows you to define tasks in your monorepo that call other tools like TSC or Vite to perform these actions. So basically what turbo repo did was they said, okay, bro, you have a common module. I get it. You have a backend module. I get it. Front end module. I get it. Let's say these three. And I get that front end depends on common. I also get that backend depends on common. Now turbo repo says, I will give you a build command. Whenever you run turbo build, I will make sure that first common runs, because that is something that both of these depend on, and then backend runs, and then front end runs. Whenever you run turbo build, I will orchestrate that bhai, first common you need to build. First common, you need to spit out your common.js file. Once this is done, then I will orchestrate that bhai, you go build and you go build parallelly, because you both depended on common. So you need to wait until this first conversion happens, and then you can go and convert your whatever index.js file, and then you can go and you can create your index.html and asset.js file. So that is what turbo repo lets you do. It lets you schedule these builds a certain way, and it also lets you parallelize them. Okay, bhai, I understand the dependency graph. This depends here, this depends here. So let's build this first. Okay, done. Let's build this next. Let's build this next. That is the first thing it does. What does it do? It does dependency management during builds. And the second big thing it does is caching during builds. It says, ki bhai, if you run turbo build and if common hasn't changed, then I will not rerun this transpilation. I will simply give you common.js and backend can start. If backend hasn't changed since the last global build means everything when you build together, then I have the cached value of this index.js. I will put it there. So caching during builds becomes super important as you have a very big project. Turbo repo makes sure that bhai, I will remember the output that these specific modules gave during building, and your net build time goes down. If you did not have Turbo Repo, what you would have done? If you did not have Turbo Repo, then you would have been like, acha, okay, I have multiple folders. I need to, since backend and frontend depend on index.js, I will first go to the common folder and run npm run build. Okay, is this done? Chalo, then I will go to the backend folder and then I will run npm run build. Okay, is this done? And then I'll go to the frontend folder. I would run these 3 commands most probably sequentially. If you're on your computer and you're trying to start the project that you've just cloned, you would first go here, run this, then go here, run this, and go. You run them sequentially. There is no concept of caching. If you forgot, okay, by did I change common in this change, this, if you make some code change and you don't know if you have changed this common folder, you will go here again and again run npm run build. Here run npm run build, npm run build. You will do this very tedious task of going into multiple folders and running this. Versus if you use Turbo Repo, you just have to do a global turbo build and this will figure out both the dependency graph. Okay, by first run this, then run both of these parallelly because they don't depend on each other. So once common is done, both of these can start. And number 2, it will start to cache your outputs so that if you run turbo build again and nothing has changed, in 1 second everything builds because it has the output stored somewhere else, cached somewhere else. Do we understand what is a build system orchestrator? How is it different from a build system? And MonoRepo framework is something else only. Because if you understand this, you have understanding of monorepos much better than I did like maybe 2 months ago. Because until 2 months ago, I thought Turbo Repo was a monorepo framework. Because as I said, when you join a company, you just join it and you're like, oh, chalo, monorepo is here or Turbo Repo is here. It is probably a monorepo framework. Good to go, chalo. You never go into the depths of what Turbo Repo is. So if you see the last video, the offline video that I have, over there I'm saying, okay, Turbo Repo is a monorepo framework. It isn't. It is a build system orchestrator, and under the hood it uses a different monorepo framework. 87% is decent. So I will proceed. This is a slightly heavy class, but the good thing is we have a bunch of code writing to do after this. So even if you don't understand a lot of concepts, at least you'll be able to code them. Once you're able to code them, you might see all of this that I'm talking about better. All right. This slide just covers the benefits of, okay, Turbo Repo is a build system orchestrator. What does that mean? It lets you do caching. It lets you do parallelization, and it is aware of your dependency graph. So it knows what to build first, what to build next. Same as the things that we discussed in the last slide. Now let's write some code. 36 minutes of, or whatever, 30 minutes of theory is enough, I think. Let's write some code. Let's build some projects, and then we'll see how caching comes into the picture, where caching comes into the picture, and go from there. All right. So let me already tell you, this takes a lot of time to install for some people. At least it did in the morning when I was in my hotel. So if this command takes more than 30 seconds for you, whatever this command creates, I have pushed over here. So feel free to clone this repository. If it does not take a lot of time for you, then just run this command. Both of them will let you initialize a Turbo Repo. Very similar to how we used to initialize React projects using Vite, or Next projects using Next, or Create Next app. Create Turbo lets you initialize an empty Turbo Repo. So feel free to do this, or if you have a slow internet, I would just clone this repository so that you're not stuck for the next. It took me a minute in the morning, so it might take you longer time. But yeah, there we go. Time to open this terminal and we go to a folder. npx create -turbo at the rate of latest. It might ask you, do you want to install this? Just say yes. It'll ask you a name of your project. I'm going to call it week 16 1 live. And notice something right after it asks you, which package manager do you want to use? npm workspaces, yarn workspaces, or bun workspaces. So as I said, this is the thing that lets you do monorepo stuff. Turbo Repo gives you some other things. It's asking you what framework do you want to use. And from what I read, you can also use Lerna with Turbo Repo. I could be wrong on this one. But apparently you can use, other monorepo tools as well. I'm just going to select npm workspaces because that's something most people have. I would urge you to eventually, install yarn, or if you want to get really fancy, bun on your machine and then select that. For now, just select npm workspaces, give it a name. The command is npx create turbo at the rate of latest. It's taking a long time for me as well. So if it takes a long time for you, it's mostly fine. Well, it did not take a long time for me. I'll wait for 30 seconds more. And for the people who were able to do it, just open it in Visual Studio Code. Twenty more seconds. Take your time. I know it takes some time. Now for the people for whom it already happened, feel free to explore the folders a little bit. Are you good to go, guys? %. I'll wait. Don't worry. No rush. Dependencies are installing. I'm assuming. Let's try again in 30 seconds. I'm not doing anything. Take a break. It's fine. 30 seconds. And then we'll proceed. I'm going to quickly try my best to skim through Q&A until then. Is Turbo Repo relevant if you use Next? If you only use Next, then no. But if you use Next with an Express server, then yes. If you use Next with a WebSocket server written in Node.js, then yes. You cannot do WebSocket in Next. So there are a lot of things you cannot do in Next. In that case, you might need it. How build happens in MonoRepo then? We'll see very soon. But as I said, build tool orchestrator. It does not build anything. Vite builds, TypeScript builds. It orchestrates when should one build. It tells that you build first and then you build first. Second, can we use Docker to run all of them sequentially? Can't we use Docker? You can use Docker to run all of them sequentially. You can also, you don't need Docker also. You can just run them sequentially in your terminal one by one. The goal is for it to be slightly faster. Maybe there is a very nice diagram that they show that I can show you here. Let me find it really quickly. They have like very extensive documentation if you want to go through it, but let me just try my best to running tasks. There we go. There we go. Take it. Here is a diagram that might help the people who still not have a lot of intuition. If you are not using Turbo Repo, then when you run npm run build, first your first module will build, then your second module will build. Sorry about that, and then your third module will build. And ignore the, well, this is linting and then this is the build and this is the test. Basically, if you first lint your code, then build your code, then test your code, there'll be a bunch of sequential steps that will happen. So the total time, let's say, could be 50 seconds because one is happening, then second is happening, then third is happening, then one is happening, then second is happening, then third is happening. Versus if you use monorepos or in specific in this case Turbo Repo, first linting happens together, testing happens together, building, the shared thing gets built first, and then the other two things get built together. So if you just focus on the red here, this is the common module that I was talking about. This is this common module that front end and back end are using. Here, as you can see, first the common module builds, let's say it takes 8 seconds, and then the other two build simultaneously. Hopefully this diagram makes it a little clearer. Let's look at the poll and see if we are good to proceed. The goal for today is how to create a monorepo that has Next.js, that has React, that has Node.js, bunch of other things. Like basically try to have a monorepo that has the most extensive things of frameworks that you might use, and then you can pick and choose whatever you want in your specific project. All right, cool. So we are at 85%. So we will proceed. I'll also do a break at 7:50, 55ish, and I'll take doubts when that happens. All right. Notice that you created this Turbo Repo. The top level folders for you also have apps and packages. So your folder structure now looks very similar to cal.com or the daily code website, because this is a standard code folder structure that TurboRepo gives you, and most projects use TurboRepo, cal.com daily code, which is why this is a very commonly seen pattern. Harkirat, can I name this to something else? Yes, you can. Can I name this to something else? Yes, you can. This is a common convention. All your applications will be here and packages will be here. I'll discuss what both of these things are very soon. All right. Exploring the folder structure. There are 5 modules in our project. If you open this on the side, if you open the folders here, you will see it has apps, which has 2 folders, docs and web, and it has packages, which has 3 folders, ESLint, TypeScript config, and UI. So there are 5 modules that are present here. What is a module, Harkirat? Things like these. Common was a module, frontend was a module, backend was a module. Anything that has some code that does some specific thing is called a module. What does UI do, Harkirat? What does TypeScript config do? We'll see very soon. The folders are divided into 2 parts: end user apps and helper packages. As the name suggests, these are your end user apps. This is what your end user hits. Could be the website, could be your backend as well. So your Node.js Express server will exist here. Your website React will exist here. Next.js website will exist here. Right now, we have 2 folders here, and if you open them, you will see they're just Next.js application. So this is a Next.js application. As you can see, it has an app/page.tsx. If you open web also, you will see this is a Next.js application. So right now there are just 2 applications here. Can we add an Express server here, Harkirat? Yes. Can I add a React project here, Harkirat? Yes. Can I add a Golang project here? Probably not. You probably don't want to add your Golang project here. What are helper packages? I understand that this is your end user app. So your React project will be here. Your Express server will be here. Helper packages are things that these guys need, or things that helper packages need as well. Basically, anytime there is something that the end user is not going to hit. For example, I said common over here. If you remember, what is in common, Harkirat? Could be any small thing that both frontend and backend share. A good example is the types of API endpoints. If there is an API endpoint, app.post/signup, if there is this API endpoint, whatever is the type of input you expect over here, let's say, username, password, this interface, this type or interface, type user sign up, username string, password string. This thing, both the front end and the backend need. The front end will need it in the form where you're submitting it. The backend will need it here to, give the type of body. If you have gone through the Medium assignment, you understand this immediately. If you have not, might feel a little overwhelming. But common ka goal is कि भाई, I will help front end backend, whatever code they need to share, give it to me, I will store, but nothing more. Don't give me, the app.tsx file. The top level app.tsx I don't have. That is this guy's job. Don't create an Express server inside me. That the backend guy will do. If there is anything they need to share, very small, give it to me. I'll keep it here in packages. That is why they're called helper packages, because they help docs and other things that exist here with, small mini functionalities that they might want to share. We'll see this UI module very soon, and you'll understand this a little better. Okay, how this Next.js application and this Next.js application are able to share React components using this UI folder that's present here. We'll see that very soon. Currently, in our case, a Next.js application, UI packages, which basically means if you open this, it just has a bunch of card.tsx component, button.tsx component, a component that can be shared by both this person and this person. And TypeScript configuration is a shareable TypeScript configuration. If you remember the tsconfig.json, this just has a bunch of these tsconfigs.json that you can import in this web/tsconfig.json. As you see, it says extend the repo/tsconfig/next.json and then adds a bunch of things on top. This, even if you don't share, it's fine. This linting folder, this ESLint config folder and TypeScript config folder. Even if you don't share, it's fine. It's not a lot of code. But this UI folder is super important. This folder has components that are shared across both this guy and this guy. App/docs and app/web actually need all of them. They extend the TypeScript configuration from this package. They extend the ESLint configuration of this package, which ignore for now. But most importantly, they both get a button component from here. Harkiriyat, why don't they get it from Material UI? Why don't they get it from Tailwind? This is your own package library. This is your own UI library. Okay, bhai, our buttons will look like this, and we will have our button code here. If you want to quickly, I don't know if they have it, but let's see. Let's see. Turbo. Yeah, if you want to quickly look at a code base that does this as well. If you open dubbing/dub, which is a popular website written by someone from Vercel, if you open packages, you will see they also have a UI folder here. If you open UI, you will see they have a bunch of components, avatar, background, badge, so on and so forth, that they have written that their top level applications use, which in their case, they have again docs and web. So I don't know why this is used, but web is their main website. So very similar structure, right? So now the next time you open a code base like this, hopefully it's clearer. Ki, achha, these are their packages and this is their end user applications. That's what Turbo Repo bootstrapped for us as well. We good to go? Okay, 85%. Good, not great, but let's see. Let's quickly run the project once. Let's see what's happening. Then we'll do a break, all right? So I would urge you to run npm install in the terminal. So open the terminal. In the root folder, run npm install followed by npm run dev. And notice a few things. When you ran npm run dev, the thing that ran was turbo dev. If I go to the top level package.json, you will see this dev command runs turbo dev, which, as if you remember a while back, I said that turbo repo is the orchestrator. This guy is like, acha, you ran dev for me. I am going to go to all the applications and run npm run dev over there. This runs the docs Next.js application. And then if you go to the web /package.json, if you run npm run dev here, this starts the docs or the web Next.js application. So the top level npm run build, dev and lint all talk to Turbo. They tell Turbo, bro, go do your thing. You're an orchestrator, right? Go build all the projects. And then Turbo orchestrates, okay, you run first, you run second, you run third. Here, if you look at the docs, it starts docs, it starts web, and then you can look at the individual logs. One of them starts on port 3000, other one starts on port 3001. If you open them, you will notice two websites which are very similar but slightly different. This thing that's written over here is different. And if you click on a button, it says hello from docs app over here. If you click on a button, it says hello from web app over here. So they're slightly different, but very similar, which means this is a perfect case where code should be shared. You shouldn't be writing this in two different places. You should be writing it in a single place and importing it here and here. That's what npm run dev does. If you're curious as to how one ran on port 3000 and other on 3001, open docs/package.json. You will notice here it says next dev, you please start here. Otherwise the ports will conflict. Both will try to start on port 3000, which is why whenever you're creating a mono repo, make sure all the individual apps start on different ports. Let's take a pause here. By this point, you should be able to at least create a turbo repo locally and start it. Make sure when you run npm run dev, you are able to see something on localhost colon 3000 and 3001. Let's do a break here. Meet back at 8 p.m. I'm going to open chat and try to go through as much questions as I can. Meet back at 8, guys. Oh, chat open. There we go. Right. Do packages UI work in the front end folder? Do packages/UI work Same as a front end folder. What is a front end folder? I bought the domain from Good. Okay, no, this is not related to this thing. UI folder. People did not understand the UI folder. Can you please recap the build and workspace part? Okay. Turbo repo build is something similar to Docker build, which cache previous build images. No, it's very different. Very different. Docker caches images, which is a full ISO file which has your file system and everything. This guy just caches the assets, which is a JavaScript file. So good question. Want to know how would it be learning Rust? Repeat, recap. Okay. Let's do a quick recap of Turbo repo. You are a developer in a company. You want to create your own website. You say, bhai, website needs a front end and a back end. The back end I will deploy on an EC2 machine. It will be hosted on api.mywebsite.com. Front end I will deploy wherever, doesn't matter, let's say on S3. And it will be hosted on mywebsite.com. This is a simple website that you thought that you will create. You said, yeah, this code base and this code base needs to share some code. One thing they need to share. What is a good example of things this guy and this guy might want to share? Let's say a variable called current. What's a good example here? These two want to share a variable, some code. I'm not getting a good example. So what can you do? Number one, you can be like, bhai, this is my backend code. Let me just open a terminal. Let me just do it here. This is my Mac machine. In my Mac machine, I will have a separate folder called website backend. And this folder, I will independently push to github.com/hkirat/website backend. And I will have a separate folder called frontend. And I will push this folder separately to this thing. This is not a monorepo. This is two different repositories on GitHub, right? The frontend is on a different repository. The backend is on a different repository. So pushing things separately. Then you say, yeah, I'm going to need 3, 4, 5 more services. Doesn't make sense for me to have so many repositories. Very hard to keep track of them. So you merge them in a single project. You say, bhai, my project has 2 top level folders, website frontend, website backend. I will push both of these over to github.com/website backend. That's it. 2 raw top level folders. Then you're like, yaar, there is some code that I'm repeating right now. There is some specific code. I'm marking it here in green, let's say. This code I have rewritten in 2 places. The frontend also needs this code. The backend also needs this code. Wouldn't it be nice if I could write this code only one time separately and then make this guy use the code from here and make this guy use the code from here as well? Both of that we don't have code repetition, right? This code isn't repeated in both the places. Great. This is where you need a monorepo framework, which lets you pretty much in the website backend import a code from something like this. Import something from common, and then in your backend code as well, lets you do the same thing. It lets you import things like this rather than doing // common or something like that. Rather than having such an ugly folder structure, it lets you import things directly from pseudo packages. Okay, haan bhai, this package doesn't exist on npm, it exists locally only, but I can fetch this package here. That is what a monorepo lets you do. What does turbo repo let you do? Turbo repo says, okay, bhai, good, you think you're really smart, you created something like this. How are you building your project? And the person is like, bro, simple. I go to common, I go to this folder, I do a cd common, then I do a npm run build, then I do a cd .. frontend, then do a npm run build, then do a cd .. backend, then do a npm run build, and I'm done. Then I do, start the front end, however, back end, however. Turbo repo said, why are you doing so many things? Just run turbo build and I will Number one, figure out what depends on what, so that I first build this npm cd common and npm run build, and then once this succeeds, I will parallelly build this and this, so that you don't have so many steps happening sequentially. Just run me. I will figure out what to build, how to build. I understand dependencies. I'll build things faster. That is the pitch of Turbo Repo. It's a build system orchestrator. It's like, okay, this will still be compiled using TypeScript. This will still be compiled using Vite. This will still be compiled using TypeScript. That is fine. I will tell when this will build, when this will build, when this will build. And if ever a file hasn't changed, a folder hasn't changed, I will immediately give you the existing cache. I have it somewhere. You don't have to actually run tsc-p over here to convert TypeScript to JavaScript. That is what Turbo Repo lets you do. If you look at the folder structure in Visual Studio Code, it is a simple monorepo structure. Ye apps, docs, web, and packages and everything is something that every monorepo has. What is new is, if you go to package.json, it has these three scripts. Okay, bhai, I will handle when to build, when to dev, and when to lint. The build orchestration is handled by me. Everything else is handled by a monorepo framework, which if you actually scroll down here to the bottom, you will see there's something called workspaces written here, which is what Yarn workspaces provide you. Turbo Repo does not provide you any of this, but we'll see what all of this is very soon. Hopefully that's a decent recap. Let's do a quick poll and then we'll proceed. We're at 8 p.m. here. Great. 90% decent, not great, but we'll proceed. I will of course take questions at the end. Cool. Hopefully you guys have run the project locally and looked at the logs and seen there's oh, some of you might be seeing this, by the way. Okay, you might need to upgrade your Node.js version because Turbo Repo enforces a certain Node.js version. So please upgrade it if you're seeing this error. And then you're good to go. We have multiple repositories in a single project which I can push to GitHub. Now let's explore the root package.json. As I said, all of this, the script section that you see, Turbo build gets run when you run npm run build. It is not tsc-p. It is not go into multiple folders and build them. It is Turbo Repo. You handle everything, bro. And if you go to workspaces, it says, bro, this project has two workspaces, apps and packages. This doesn't matter if, where the websites are, where the helper packages are, but these are the two places where you will find things that need to share code amongst each other. This is not Turbo Repo. This is Turbo Repo. This is right now npm workspaces, but you could use Lerna, you could use Yarn workspaces as well. I think we understand this. When you run Turbo build, when you run npm run build, Turbo build goes into all the packages and apps and runs npm run build inside them, provided they have it. For example, if I go to my root folder and run npm run dev, you will see it starts two things: docs dev, web dev. It does not start UI dev because UI/package.json does not have a dev script. If you look at it, it has a lint script, something else, does not have a dev script, which is why if in the root folder I run npm run dev, it goes into apps/docs/package.json and runs dev because dev is present here. Also goes into apps/web/package.json and runs next dev over here. Same for build, same for lint. Ignore lint for now if you don't know what linting means, but I hope you know what build means. It means when you're building for production. Dev means when you're just starting it locally. Now let's explore the UI package. This is the most important thing. This is something we saw on dub.sh as well. This is something we see in our project as well. Most important use case of Turbo monorepos, I would say. Sharing React components. If you have two websites that look very similar, for example, that have a button like this, it's a good idea to put that code in a single place and make it be shared. The way you can do that is create a UI package. So basically go to packages/UI. They've already created one for us, but if they did not, I would just create this specific project. And if you look at package.json, from the top, let's start. It says name @repo/UI. That seems weird. Why is it not called UI? Why is it not called, just say Express. Whenever you look at the Express code bases package.json, you'll find Express there. When you look at Mongoose, you'll see Mongoose there. Here it says at repo/UI. Why? Because generally, whenever and in case you publish these to npm, you will want them namespaced in your own project name, which is why generally you will always see something like this, cal/ui at dub/ui. You'll always prefix, doesn't matter, you don't have to own that npm username as well, but you usually prefix everything with a certain username and then write UI. Can I still do this, Harkirat? You can do this. If you want to do this as well, that is fine. But generally all packages are prefixed by a username, all of them. Exports is an important section we'll see very soon. That's pretty much the only important thing in this package.json. This export section, as the name suggests, what all this package exports. In the end, this is a helper package. This is something that these guys will use. So you specify, okay, bhai, if someone does import something from at repo/ui/button, then give them this component. If they do at repo/ui/card, then give them this component. If they do at repo/ui/code, then give them this component. That is what this exports section means. Harkirat, if this has 100 packages, will I put 100 things here? Yes. You can also do something fancy. You can be like, bhai, I just have one simple export to an index.ts file. And in that top level index.ts file, you can export everything. Export star from, ./card. Anything. You can do this as well. But this is how things used to be done. This is a recent pattern that Turbo Repo has introduced. I don't know why. Okay, bhai, whatever you want exported from this UI module, make sure you've mentioned it here. If you don't mention it here, other people will not be able to import it. Right now, as you can see, it has three things: a button component, a card component, and a code component. If you open the button component, very simple React component, nothing too fancy here. If you don't know TypeScript, then this might feel a little fancy. This is like the props that it expects, or more specifically the type of the props that it expects. It expects children, class name, and app name. Feels very complicated. You don't need any of this for now. You can have a very simple button component as well. Does not matter. If you want to go fancy, you can. But even this works. Hi from button. I hope this is a very simple component that has no props. So you won't be confused looking at the 10 different things that are here. But if you know TypeScript already, not very difficult stuff. A very simple button component. Given I've already defined this, how can I use this? That is the whole point, right? These are helper functions that other people can use. If I save this and if I run npm, or I'm already running npm run dev, if you look at what's running on 3000, you will see the button that says hi from button, and it has no styles for me. And if I go to localhost 3000 also, it says, it's refreshing, hi from button. So that means, Harkirat, this button you make code change once and it reaches both the places. Yes. How, Harkirat? Because both the places, if I go to apps/web/app/page.tsx, I repeat, web app page.tsx, you will notice I'm importing this button from at repo/ui/button. So this button is coming from where? If I hover over it and press enter, it will take me to this button.tsx file in which I just wrote the code. Even your editor understands that this takes you here. That is what Yarn Workspaces lets you do. And we'll see, Harkirat, where is this? This should be in package.json. If you write express here, that express is in package.json. Yes. And even at repo/ui is in package.json. If I open package.json here in the web folder, you will see it says amongst the many dependencies, there is at repo/ui. It says star over here, which means find it here somewhere in the packages or in the apps. That is what star means. It does not have a numerical version, but anytime any of these apps want to either use a package or, let's say one app amongst themselves, usually they don't. Usually the apps only use something from packages. You have to specifically say, bhai, ke this app's package.json at repo/ui star, which means find it somewhere here. That is how you give this dependency over to web or docs. And once this dependency is given, you just import it like this. Just how button is imported, other components are imported as well. But do we understand this specifically? I think too many things happen very quickly, but we'll see. Let's do a poll. No, not too bad, not too good. So no, man, slowly going towards bad. All right, 74%. Okay, let me see what all is left. Based on that, we'll decide. Seems like mono repos are going to be a 2-day thing. So we'll do it the same thing tomorrow as well. Let's see what's left. Okay, here. So we can do some practice. We can write some code. Let's familiarize ourselves with a turbo repo. Tomorrow, we will cover some advanced concepts like how do you introduce a Node.js application? How do you introduce a common module? How do you add a React application? This file called turbo.json. We'll discuss all of this tomorrow. Today, we've sort of explored packages and this thing. Let's go through these slides and then let's do a bit of Q&A. Let's not rush if this is a new concept. Do all of these tomorrow. Let me take you through the last set of things. And then we'll take a pause and I'll just take questions. Exploring app/web, as I said, this is how our final structure would look like. There'll be apps which will depend on packages. And you have to give a specific package as a dependency in package.json with star as the version if you want it to be used. And this is how you import it and finally render that button at the bottom. So this is one thing I did not show, but if I import a button from at repo, I've imported it and I've also used it over here. I don't need to pass any more arguments because the button component that I wrote doesn't expect any more arguments. So if I save this, don't even need to give the children here. Just this much is good enough. A simple button component expects no arguments. And I see it on my Next.js application. The app/page.tsx renders something here at the slash endpoint, which is why, that's what we see. All right. Let's take a breather /pause maybe this is as far as this class will go. Yeah. And if you want, you can explore all of these yourself or we'll do them tomorrow. Let me open chat here and see what's up. Or let me just do a poll maybe. And based on that, we can decide. Should we continue on to the next slides? Yes or no? If the answer is no, significantly, then we'll just do Q&A. Oh, it's pretty significant. Like pretty 50-50, which pretty much means, let's take a pause here. And for the people who do understand everything, now read some docs and, try to, pretty self-explanatory docs from here. So try to go through everything else. It's not too difficult to understand things after this. This is how you, if you're in a new company, this is how you'll find the repository. Then you'll just figure things out, right? कि अच्छा, okay, docs में यहाँ जाके web page.tsx is importing something from here. So this takes you here. This is how you would explore. If you did not know what mono repos are or what turbo repo is, I did not when I joined a few companies. I just started to explore the code. कि अच्छा, you will not know everything in open source code base or otherwise, but high level you can, as page.tsx renders the first thing. If someone asks you, okay, make this code change in this website, that this should say hi from something else, you'll first go to अच्छा, where is the slash handler for this? You'll go here. Then यहाँ पे जाके you'll reach the button render के अच्छा here. Then you'll hover over this, press enter. Then you'll understand कि अच्छा, this reaches UI. And then you'll start to add code here. So you can already explore it like this. Basically, assuming you don't know mono repos, but I'll pause here and let's do a bunch of questions. What exactly seems? I mean, this is a jarring concept, specifically based on how deep we are going in it. So let's see. A lot of questions, and we will try to answer all of them. All right. I'm sorry, I always start from the bottom. Explain the folder structure. I'm assuming that's what explain folder means. Only 2 folders you need to understand. Apps, packages. This has all your end user applications. I can create a backend folder here. I can go into this. It is recording. My bad. I can go into this backend folder, app/backend. I can initialize an empty backend project, npx tsc-init. I can create a source folder here. I can put an index.ts file here. I can add express to it, so on and so forth. Anything you see here is a backend, front end, the thing that actually starts. Versus by starts, I mean, it's a long running process. A backend is a long running process. A Next.js server is a long running process. A React project also, it's not a long running process, but the HTML, CSS, JavaScript needs to be always available so that the user can hit them. Versus these packages, this are things that these guys can use. Very good example is UI components. There are multiple Next.js applications in our case, one running on port 3000, one running on 3001. Both of them require something from this UI folder, which is why we defined that common code separately in source/button.tsx. We imported this source/button.tsx code in both the places. If I go to docs/app/page.tsx, I see import at the top. If I go to web/app/page.tsx, I see the import at the top. So what does Turbo Repo or Mono Repos let you do? It lets you structure your project in a way where your end user packages are here. End user apps are here. Helper packages are here. If Docker builds cache, all the unchanged layers only build change ones similar to Turbo Repo build, which caches all the things. How is it different? Yes. The thing that's different is layers are what's being cached over there. JavaScript files are what are being cached over here. If I run npm run build in the root folder, if I run it once, you'll see it takes a long time. And one of them failed because I am passing these. Okay, let me fix that really quickly. Let me run it one more time. The first time I run npm run build, it takes a long time. Second time I run it, happens immediately. It says 2 cached, 2 total. So this caches the final .next folder, the thing that npm run build gives you in a next folder. If you go to cd node modules .cache/turbo, you can actually see these compressed files that you can uncompress and look at the contents. When you look at the contents, it will be a bunch of JavaScript files. In case of Docker, it's a bunch of layers and images. So what's being cached is different, but yes, they're both doing the same thing. If the files are unchanged, I will use a cache. Turbo Repo is similar to a school timetable by which teachers can see in which class at what time they have to teach. They will teach what their subject is, like math, physics, similar to TypeScript. Yes. React project, yeah. And then decide what to turbo build. That's a good analogy. Also, instead of pushing my common folder to npm, can we use it locally? Yeah, you can. That's the whole point, right? This UI folder, I haven't pushed to npm. If you look at this UI folder, it's existing locally, yet I can import things like this. This thing is not on npm. It's coming from here. That's what Mono Repos let you do. Off topic. Husky folder, it just lets you, when you're committing, it does a bunch of pre-checks and makes sure you're committing the right thing. And why is it some packages have multiple lock files? Yeah, you should not have multiple lock files. You should have one. I know we have multiple, but yeah, you should just have yarn most probably. Page isn't working. Locals didn't see anything. A response also give 3. That's sound. Have you done npm? Yunus, are you able to run normal React projects and normal Next.js projects? Can we create a project using React, Express, Mongo, and explain everything from scratch so that recap bhi ho jayega? Yeah. So after we are done with this, is when we will build not Mongo, but we'll use Prisma plus SQL, and we'll build the either Paytm or something else. We'll do a poll using everything. So Mono Repos, Next.js, maybe even Express, bunch of other things. Yeah. In traditional repo, we have 2 main folders, backend and frontend. So what we use in Turbo Repo, do packages in UI work similar as frontend folder. Is that use of frontend code bases? In a traditional repo, we have 2 main folders, backend and frontend. Yes, frontend has React. You go to frontend folder, you run npm run dev. So when we use Turbo Repo, packages/UI is not the same as the frontend folder. The frontend folder is similar to these folders right here, docs and web. The packages/UI is a helper folder from where this guy also imports some modules and this guy also imports some modules. Why, Harkirat? to avoid code repetition. If they did not import the button component from here, they would have the button component defined here also, defined here also. So you would have the same component written twice, which is bad because don't repeat yourself. The common rule of computer science. If something can be shared, extract it out into a separate module and use it in both the places. What is the advantage of using multiple repos? So yeah, there is one deployment becomes very easy. Here deployment is a mess, right? If I push something to the front end code, the back end code ka deployment also starts, because the deployment is a lot of times dependent on, even if a file changes, you redeploy. That's one downside, which is why people try to separate. You can try to get around it through weird hacks, but it still becomes a problem. Number two, a lot of developers are pure front end. They get very overwhelmed looking at code bases. These are like two I can think of. Please consider these questions. Let's see. How to configure, great question. Ye pucha na sawal. Figure it out. I mean, I'm happy to teach you. This was something I tried recently. Okay, how do I integrate Tailwind with the monorepo when I was doing the daily code website? So basically this website does do it. You have to go through a bunch of hacks to get around it, but you can. If you want to try to explore, apps/backends, frontend/web/tailwind.config.js here. As you can see, basically this is the thing that I'm talking about, which is a little weird. You have to, tell Tailwind ke bhai, the packages exist here as well. UI exists here as well. Please create the class names from here as well. This is a weird thing I'm talking about. Seems like dub.sh does it a little bit better. If you open their code base, they have a packages/tailwind config folder. So they do it probably in a way where this Tailwind config is shared by multiple guys, because they have multiple frontends. We don't have multiple frontends, which is why I've just shoved it inside web. If I have another frontend that needs to have this config, I'll probably create it as a shared package over here. But that's a good question, because I did this recently, so I know. But yeah, I also followed a blog post. I was seeing some issues, it was not working. I realized I need to add, /packages. So companies set up projects directly with Turbo Repo. Yeah. That's what, right? If you look at the dub.sh code base, the folder structure is exactly the same, right? So yeah, that's the first thing you run. A lot of times companies are there. They suddenly realize we have to, number one, either introduce a monorepo framework, or they're on Lerna and they want to move to Turbo Repo. So, they don't necessarily start the way we started. But if you're starting a fresh project, yes, a lot of times old projects are moved over to things like these. How to deploy a Turbo Repo is what we'll cover in the CI/CD part, which will most probably not happen this week, but in an offline video. But high level, it's the same as a normal repo, which has multiple folders, right? You run npm run build, you run a global npm run build, you get the assets, you push the assets in the separate places, in the respective places. The good thing is, how do you push it using CI/CD directly from GitHub, which is something we'll discuss. TurboPack is a competitor to Webpack. It's still in beta. I would not use it. But basically, yeah, lets you bundle code. The thing that I was saying, like TSC is the build and Turbo Repo is the orchestrator. TurboPack is their answer, we will build also. So that's their answer to, we'll be the build system as well. Can you explain about linting and Prettier? I can do an offline video, but high level, what does linting mean? Okay, it's a jargon for a few, but basically your code should look correct, very standard. If you go to, if you try to contribute to 100x/CMS, every pull request that's running here, you will only see a check mark if the person who has submitted the pull request. As you can see, it says linting formatting on PR. Anytime a person sends a pull request, we make sure that bhai, whatever code have you written, do you have the right set of spaces here? Do you not have too many spaces here? Things like these. So this is what linting means, making sure that they're following the standard indentation in all the places. And the way it hooks to CI/CD is that you can make sure that bhai, this will start to fail, and the developer would understand that my lint isn't correct, and he'll go there and fix it. So that's why that's linting in CI/CD, but I hope you understand what linting and Prettier and ESLint basically let you do this thing, like enforce and fail if one of these, spaces is incorrect. Should we only use monorepo, Turbo Repo if repo is having multiple common shared code? No, you can just use Yarn workspaces. You don't need Turbo Repo. Turbo Repo is the fanciest thing to do. Do you need Kubernetes to deploy your app? No, you can deploy it directly on EC2. Should you? If your application scales very quickly, if you have it on Kubernetes, your life will be great. If not, then your life will be hard. So you have to pick and choose, right? Depending on how fast you have to move versus how scalable from day one you have to build the system. If you want a very scalable system from day one, which is the worst idea if you're building a business very quickly, or joining a startup that's doing things very fast, So you should use Turbo Repo. If you want to be like, nahi bro, I want to quickly start things up, then as you can see, daily code I wanted to build with Peace. It has monorepo. This I did not have the time, so I just added an Next.js application. You can always add Turbo Repo here. It's not too difficult, but migration is a little bit of a pain. So if you can start from Turbo Repo, great. Should we only use? Okay, answer that. Looks good. Doesn't make dev experience complex. I guess I have to wait for seeing a real use case. Yeah. Real use case is real. Okay, what is the real use? What is the how do these guys make money? Why did Turbo Repo even exist? The answer is just one answer, which you will not ever see for a long time unless you have a very big company. It's remote caching. What happens is when you're in GitHub and if you deploy directly from this is your GitHub repository and you push a commit over here. This commit then first builds somewhere. It builds in, a GitHub machine. Basically npm run build happens over here and a JavaScript file is created, right? And then this JavaScript file reaches your EC2 machine where you have actually, let's say, deployed your backend code. The problem that happens is when you're pushing to code, the code to GitHub, a lot of times you're not changing anything in the backend folder. You're changing things someplace else. But this build happens again and gets pushed to EC2 again. Then happens again, pushed to EC2 again. What Turbo Repo gives you is something called remote caching, which is, bhai, I will let you store this bundle somewhere on S3 or, somewhere in an object store so that if the code hasn't changed in subsequent commits, I will just use this cached value and send it directly to EC2. You don't have to run npm run build again over here. That is the real nirvana thing they provide you. Do most companies use it? No, not for the longest time. Until you have a big company where 100 people are committing code every day, this build time doesn't become a problem. It becomes a problem if you have a very big company, which is when you'd use this remote caching, and that's the biggest, I guess, offering that they offer. Okay, another Notion doc. UI folder is something like companies folder where you can keep different components folder. Exactly. It's like the components folder of this website. Correct. Exactly. I was working in okay, that's not related. What is the benefit of having two front-end apps in a mono repo such as webs and docs? Don't we need to host them on different domains? Yes. Having your code in one place doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be deployed in one place. It can still be deployed in two different places. Having the code in the same place gives you the benefit of those two websites can share code amongst themselves. It does not give you the benefit of, or it does not force you to deploy them on the same domain. You can still deploy them on two different domains. When CI/CD pipelines, most probably now offline video, or if you really want to do it live, then next week, because we have a few offline topics to cover, so I can pick and choose what I do offline for next week. I think it's not very hard, but it's so easy that everyone is thinking it is very easy. That's the thing, at least when you look at it. If you understand this, the build, optimization, remote caching, then it's a little hard. If you just use it as a monorepo framework, then it's very easy. If Docker builds caches, okay, answer that. Is this hinders to make it hard to deploy distributedly? Sort of. Since only one repo will have to get, sort of. It's not a single point of failure per se. When will that failure happen? When GitHub goes down. When GitHub goes down, all your repositories will be down. The reason it becomes problematic is, you have a lot of CI/CD actions basically. Eventually, if you have 10 different services here, every, let's say, backend service, front-end service, let's open another one. If you have multiple services, this actions gets extremely polluted because there is something deploying on backend. Okay, what is this action, Harkirat? This one action might be deploying to AWS. How do you add this action, Harkirat? We will see when we reach the CI/CD pipeline part. But all of this gets populated by a lot. Okay, bhai, every 1 minute there are hundreds of these actions that are coming because one is deploying to front end, back end, one server, two server, server 3, things like that. It's not really a single point of failure. All of these actions happen parallelly, so there's no difference of them running in a single repository or multiple. What gets problematic is if a code change happens in front end, back end redeploys. If a code change happens in back end, front end redeploys. So you have to really try your best to optimize when something redeploys. That's the thing that's here. You guys can leave. You don't have to stay. I'm just answering questions. I'm not teaching anymore. We'll do the rest of the slides tomorrow. Okay, smiley face here, so I'll answer. Do you recommend using monorepos for creating personal projects? No, unless you're impressing a company. If you're sending a portfolio project to someone, you don't have to. Do we any packages like you told, for example, in my workspaces for creating monorepos, like we can't create a front end and back end in a common folder and put all these in one repo using any package. Do we call it? Do we any packages like you told, for example, npm workspaces for creating monorepos? Do we need? I guess is a question. Like, can't we just? You can just create a front end and back end and common folder. The only problem there will be, you will import like this button from dot slash common slash whatever page.ts and their TypeScript will get a little finicky because TypeScript will be like, array, you are going outside your repository. There are ways to fix that using tsconfig, but generally you don't want this throughout your code base, right? Which is why, can you do it? Yes. Should you do it? No. You should use a monorepo framework. That's exactly what they provide. NeoVim video is on. It's not on YouTube because of a copyright strike. First one that I got. So you can go here to the ad hoc section. You'll find it here. It's in the wrong folder. It's in the Mumbai meetup folder, but you get the idea. Can we do a serverless backend, Next.js and React? So we're doing Express backend. We're doing Next.js. We're doing React. We are not doing serverless backend. We can. It's very simple. If you know all three of these, serverless backend is very simple. What could be the common code between frontend and backend? Go to the Medium assignment, Medium blog project. There is a common code there. It's a very popularly used common code between frontend and backends. It's types of data that's being shared between frontend and backend. Why can't we write a bash script to run these apps sequentially? Parallelly, I'm assuming you mean. Why need a monorepo? Can turborepo be used in Python? Probably no. Turborepo is a framework for JavaScript and TypeScript. You can write a bash script, but what happens as you have 20 packages? You will have to be like, okay, chalo, front end one depends on common. So I first need to build common and then front end, and then another package came. Turborepo gives you out of the box, right? Turborepo is like, bro, as long as you have package.json made the right dependencies. So if I go to app/web/package.json, it goes here, figures out ki acha, it creates the dependency graph itself. You don't have to do anything extra to create bash scripts, which is why you figures out the dependency graph itself. Versus here you will have to, you might miss something, you might have the wrong order of builds, which is why turborepo is better. Can you do it? You can do everything. Do you need React? No, you can create your own React, but it does a bunch of things as a library that you can quickly use. That's the only benefit. You can write bash scripts. Can we delete everything in app/web and create a React app? Will that work? Yeah. So delete this app/web, delete this app/docs, delete this app/backend, create a new React application here using Vite. That's exactly what's done in a slide here. So you can just follow the slide that says adding a React project. You can add whatever you want. You don't have to specify it somewhere. The only thing that needs to be specified is this. Okay, bhai, this is a workspace. This is a workspace. You'll find a bunch of folders here. You'll find a bunch of folders here. That's it. You don't have to ever tell, okay, bro, added a new React app or something like that. What if we have React frontend and Node.js backend, no Next.js? What are the changes we'll need to make? So exactly, that's for that. Go to the slides. React, go to the last slide that has, the second last slide has Node.js. Pretty much nothing, right? Delete everything. Add a new folder here. Introduce Next.js, React, introduce Node.js. Node has some specific, like not Node, but like the TypeScript compiler is a little weird with turborepo for the longest time, like ever since I was introduced to them. So whenever you're compiling your backend projects, you use something called TSUp or ESBuild, which compile your TypeScript code to JavaScript code. That's the only extra thing you need to know. I've mentioned that in this slide as well. You can make TSC work. I made once. It just makes your TS config very ugly for that specific backend code, which is why I just use TSUp or ESBuild. These are also compilers that compile TypeScript to JavaScript. And you won't see a bunch of issues that you will with TSC. How to do? Okay, answer that. If I want to use any library, then how will I use turborepo? What does that mean? Create a project using okay, answer that. I'm not sure what micro frontends are, so I'm not sure if you can use turborepo to. I've heard that buzzword. I haven't ever dived into them. So I cannot answer that. Are they like just a code snippet? And if that's the case, then yes. What percentage of companies using Turbo Repo mono repos? I have not gone through every company and their code base. Most open source projects, most TypeScript code bases, unless they are pure Next.js, use it. But I was going through a GSOC project that they just use Lerna, they don't use Turbo. So yeah, it depends on the company, but a lot of them do basically. And this is the most sort of twisted one to understand, because it does things more than just a mono repo. Okay. Small queries. How to structure the APIs in a mono repo like V1, V2, and route for both V1, V2 in a mono repo? It's not any different from a normal repo. If you have a backend project, you have a top level app dot use V1 that points to a V1 router, and then whenever you introduce your V2 API, then you add a top level app dot use V2 and then your V2 router, and your V2 router handles all the version 2 of your APIs. Can we cover ESLint? We can. It's fairly simple. ESLint and PTR are very simple, but offline video sure I'll throw in. Earlier, we deploy frontend to Vercel, backend to AWS or Cloudflare. How to deploy backend and frontend when they're in a single repo? Remains the same. If you go to Vercel, it'll understand you're using a Turbo repo. Vercel, it'll understand you're using a Turbo repo. Just select your apps folder. It'll deploy. If you're deploying it on EC2 or if it's a React project you want to deploy on S3, remains the same, right? You on your server that's deploying, you build the project, you run Turbo build, you get the final assets, you deploy them to S3. So there's nothing new. It's just you have multiple deployment pipelines because multiple things are being deployed. But the way to deploy remains the same. The way to push to S3 remains the same. The way to push to EC2 remains the same. What is apps as web docs? Are they two different front end? They are two different front end apps. That should be pretty one will be deployed on docs.100xdev.com, one will be deployed on app.100xdev.com. They are two different front ends. A common case for this is if you go here, you guys go here, I go to a different website called admin.classics.co.in, for example, where I add a course, add a video. So this company needs to have two front ends, right? One for the admins, one for the end users. So this is a use case where a company might need multiple front ends, and this is how you build multiple front ends in the same project. Why separate UI into packages? I think they are used only in front end. So why can't we keep them in front end /source/component? Where is front end? But they are used by two front ends, right? Not one. They are UI in this packages folder is used by both of these two. Oh, you get the idea. There were two folders here. So you've kept it separately. If it was used by just one, then you can shove it there. But if it needs to be reused, then you need to create a separate package out of it. Suppose I want to use Tailwind with UI components. Should I set up the packages? Yeah. So as I said, everything remains the same. The Tailwind config gets a little weird while setting it up, but I'll cover that. I thought I would cover that, but it's a very simple thing to do, and it's already present on this daily code base. So I would urge you to go to the Tailwind config file here and try to understand how it would work. I recently saw PNPM is another package manager, just like Yarn, NPM. It's a more fancy one. So we moved from Yarn to PNPM in Backpack. It goes away with a bunch of errors, random errors that come in Yarn. That's the only high level. And someone else migrated from Yarn to PNPM. But I saw the number of build errors go down. Build errors, Harkirat. A lot of times whenever you're converting TypeScript code to JavaScript code, you'll see something does not work using NPM. But as soon as you use Yarn, it starts to work. So yeah, I haven't read through the actual benefits that it provides. It is becoming very popular / fancy right now though. Schedule of 0 to 1, CI/CD ho gaya, Turbo repo ho gaya. So we need to just do one big project. Could be Paytm, could be something else, which uses mono repos, TypeScript, Prisma, Postgres. You get the idea, everything. Maybe cover some random topics, WebSockets, things like these. That's it. Probably should be able to complete by end of month. I'm thinking worst case mid of next month. All right. As well. Keep 5% of the code base. The only way I'm able to figure out the top 5% is by looking at contributions to this code base. So just contribute here is how I will know. For you, just build a lot of projects. Easy peasy. This is probably so was this easy? Because it seemed the percentage of people who understood was really low, like probably the lowest it's ever been. I don't know why. Was this really very easy, what all we've done? And I thought it would be. I thought we would be able to cover everything today. This wasn't. Okay. No, so wasn't. Okay, 75% say good, 25% say not easy. It's fine. Something you need to know though, and the depth in which we're covering it is something you'll probably not need for a longest time. So yeah, you pretty much know Turbo Repo pretty well after this 2-day class, I guess. All right. What are the okay? Answer that. Can you explain more repo framework from slide 5? Let's see. 1 second. Slide 5. Can you explain monorepo framework? So basically this thing right here. A monorepo framework provides you tools and conventions for managing projects. Yeah. So as I said, if you are not using a monorepo framework, you will have to import things like this. Import button from // packages / buttons / index.ts or whatever, buttons / button.tsx. This will become extremely problematic for a few reasons. Number one, you might change the folder where it exists. So everywhere now you have to do this. Okay, bhai, ye to thoda piche shift ho gaya. I shifted before, shift after, wherever. Number two, it gets problematic because TypeScript will be like, where is this file? My the folder ends over here. So you're trying to find something from someplace else. So it will begin to complain. As you can see, it's already, this is not that error, but you will see an error like this. This is why monorepo frameworks let you basically link files across various folders like this. That's the benefit. When Docker video uploaded on the website, Docker video should be uploaded on the website. I think it is already. I mean, I'm pretty sure it is. But if not, just tag me and let me know. It should be there. Week 15. All right. Let's see. Turbo to have Tailwind example, which is very easy. Check it out. Very, 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 very easy. Okay, check it out. Who contribute daily code will find it easy. So seems like there's already a starter code here that you can find. A lot of the starter codes don't work, by the way. If you go to the kitchen sink example over here, in the last cohort, I don't know if they've changed it since, but this broke. Like we tried to, so I don't know if they're maintained very well, but yeah, seems like with Tailwind sounds exactly what we need. How do you add? So yeah, they have a bunch of examples here, by the way. React Native. If you want to add a React Native to your monorepo, you can see with Prisma, with NPM, with React Native Web, so on and so forth, with Svelte, with Tailwind, with Vite. So yeah, they have like a bunch of examples. How to sign up after cloning the CMS repo? Just use the password 123456. Oh, sorry, no courses found associated to your account. Please, okay, that sounds weird. Please make a project using Recoil, Atom and Selector family and many-to-many relationships in Prisma. Let me write this down. This is a very specific ask. Many-to-many relationships in Prisma. And what was the other one? Also, you have to debug the thing yourself, by the way. Maybe you have not migrated. You probably haven't migrated your code base. Yeah, 99%. You haven't run the PSQL command that's in. Oh, I don't think we have the PSQL command anymore. I think someone else added a migration script. Just make sure your database is populated, basically. Recoil, Selector, family. All right. How is Versal making money out of Turbo? Yeah, so as I said, they let you do remote caching. So they'll build a business out of there. Okay, we'll give you very fast remote caching. I don't know if they'll make money, but yeah, Versal has a very good core product, right? So they can invest in things like these. They a lot of times just want developers and not their product. How will they make money out of ShatCN? ShatCN makes no money. But it's a good UI library. A lot of people are using Versal. Will make that's it. All right. Percentage मुझे नहीं पता. I don't know the percentage of people. Docker Turbo creates a file step-by-step command. Find a Turbo creates his own file to run step-by-step command or totally own. Also in Docker, no, it does not create any Docker file kind of a file. There's a turbo.json. So that is something we'll discuss tomorrow. But there's like this basically says, whenever build runs, all the individual projects sys build should run. This is a single file where you sort of write, bhai, whenever the user runs npm run lint, this should run in the individual folders. That's how it happens. Off topic, can you share some good GitHub code bases to understand company code bases for a fresher with no experience? Dub.sh is the best one, and the maintainer is also very friendly, but don't spam. But he's a very good guy. जॉब बेस्ड क्वेश्चन यार मैं थोड़ा भी स्किप करता हूँ सो दैट आई कैन आंसर द अदर टेक्निकल क्वेश्चंस. Tech stack question, should I learn? Do one thing really deep is all I'll say. It's like a common question that people have. Honest inputs. Okay, this one. End-to-end project should include majority of these topics we have covered. Let's see. Planning feature. Okay. Product features. This thing is a good thing you added. This thing is a good thing you added. This thing is a decentish thing you added. These are hard to build without. We'll see. Okay. Good thing you added. Very good thing you added, but okay, we'll see. Testing, okay. Containerization, CI/CD sounds good. Turbo repo, ESLint sounds good. Yeah. Some of these are good. Some of these are good, but very time consuming. So we'll see. But yeah, I'll try to. Macy, I'll try that. Clipboard manager. All right. Next up. Oh, my eyes. All right. Can we use React and Express? I don't want to use. Yeah, you can. As I said, if you go to the slides at the end over here, you can use Next and React and Node.js or whatever you want. Like you might face some random compilation issues from time to time, but yes, you can use any framework. Define it in app, the top level app folder. Okay, answer this. Why the fuck is everything in the same repository? How will I host my frontend Vercel but background in AWS? Yeah, so that's fairly simple. Whenever a commit happens, you can in that CI/CD pipeline specify कि भाई run two things. Number one, deploy this artifact to Vercel. Number two, deploy this artifact to AWS. So it's actually very easy. Theoretically, might feel very weird. Oh, how will this happen? But like you can start multiple processes that deploy to 10 different places. So it's not difficult at all to deploy a monorepo to multiple things. Okay, how is Vercel making? Okay, answer that. What credentials do you have to use to log into App? Just use the password 123456 and it should let you in. Oh, there is a Docker file. Does the Docker file not migrate? Maybe that might be the issue. Because there was a person who made that change. Maybe he forgot to put the other change. Let's see. Docker file. Yeah, that's the issue right there. There should be a unless dev docker, this probably doesn't do it. Yeah, so there is a migration seed Prisma seed.ts. We basically need to run this in the Docker file. Maybe it already runs. I don't know. But my guess is this is not running. So if you're this basically will put a bunch of dummy data, including a bunch of courses, right? So most probably you haven't run this. Try to run this specific code either directly or put it in the Docker file if it's not currently in the Docker file, and that should populate the databases, which might be something that's missing right now. And if that is the case, just update the Docker file as well. I asked about use cases of Web3 and you said transaction swapping money, and there are a lot of money to be made, but I was asking from a startup viewpoint. You're saying, give me a small product. There are no small companies that make money. You can do a bunch of faddy things and build a small company in Web3. I'm building the next decentralized Uber. The real use cases, there are behemoths that do it. It's very hard for you to compete with them. If you want to build the next Binance, MetaMask, you can try. But there's years of moat that they've gotten into that business. So it's not easy to build a big company yourself. You can try a bunch of faddy use cases though. Chat is open. All right. If I add GitHub Actions to daily code, will you use it to explain the CI/CD? And those contribute daily code will be in the 5%. That's a good idea. Yeah, that's you're almost 100% in the 5% of the cohort. If you are able to create a CI/CD pipeline that deploys to Firebase and deploys to where is the front end? Vercel only. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, yeah. If you can, yeah, it's not, it's less than 10 lines of code, but the effort and figuring it out on your own is the thing that really differentiates the 5%. If I add answer that. Notion docs. When are we completing middleware stuff in Next.js? Yeah, we'll try. I'll try. Not try. I'll try. I'll try next week. There's middlewares. There's next auth. There's a bunch of things. If I add GitHub, okay, so that on running npm run build node modules folder in the root folder, but it's not present in individual apps like Lerna. Any specific to Turbo? Yes, Turbo will put as many things as it can. It will push to the root folder. You can enforce कि भाई this dependency does not need to be in the root folder, needs to be forced to this apps/UI folder, but as many things as it can, it will push to the root folder. I did not know Lerna had individual. I haven't worked too much with Lerna. If a GitHub action on a answer that. Bangalore video, haven't been able to upload it yet. As soon as I'm able to upload it, I will upload it for the editor to edit, and then it'll edit it, and then it'll reach. So I will see probably next week. What should we mention on resume? Monorepo or Turbo repo? Turbo repo. OpenAI, which model we have to use by for learning purposes? As in, like, should you use GPT-4, GPT-3, 3.5 works. How to sign up? Okay, answered that. Yeah, if you're not able to do it, your DB hasn't migrated. Figure out how to migrate your database. That's the biggest problem you're probably seeing if you're not seeing the courses. Answer that. Okay, looking at the Notion docs next. Page not found. Whoever had this can't find app as top level folder. Your page isn't public, so I'm not able to see it. All right, let's do it one more time, guys. Then we'll call it. Oh, seriously. There we go. Oh wow, a lot of questions this time. Okay. Be honest, is PRs like this recommended? Is the first PR? Let's see. Added a spinner component that displays spinner when it's being authorized. Yeah, so I'll tell you good things, bad things about this one. Number one, not really needed. It's over-engineered a bit in the sense, this seems like bad UX. Usually, just disabling the button is good enough. You've replaced the button with a loader, which is not great. Seems like, yeah. So bare minimum thing. What would have been great here was you created but you updated this button component. I'm assuming this comes from ShadCN. You updated this to add a prop that said disabled and a prop that said loading. And if loading is true, then you added a small loader to the next, like inside the button right next to it, rather than doing what you've done here. I'm assuming you're conditionally rendering either a sign up or, yeah, there you go. So I wouldn't conditionally render this. I would pass in a prop here that says loading equal to true. And inside there, I would, do it. Whenever you're creating a PR that's not asked for, make sure the UX is top line. Otherwise, that's an easy merge. Otherwise, like, yeah, we did not need it, but I'll do it like that. So it's a decent PR, but not done the right way. How to practice with TypeScript and Prisma? What project? Why are you building a project? The question is what one? Which project? Which is very heavy on TypeScript and Prisma. What is a DB heavy application? Try to build a social network with followers and followings and things like these. That's a slightly DB heavy project. Mumbai meetups have been posted on my Twitter and also announced. Oh, Mumbai meetup photos. They're on a Drive link. Maybe we forgot to share. Let me ping Roki. He'll announce it. They are on a Drive link though. Are Drive link of Mumbai meetup announce, please, on Discord. All right. What is the difference between Vite ESBuild, which is the compiler for it? Which one is a build system? Both of them are interchangeably. Both are build systems. Both let you compile, convert, build, bundle, minify, convert to JavaScript, uglify also. I'm unsure if they probably, I don't know, maybe not uglify. TypeScript code into JavaScript, or a lot of times Vite is something we use for bundling even in a pure JavaScript code base. It converted all your JSX components into a JavaScript file. So Vite and even ESBuild in this case let you bundle JavaScript files. Okay, do I need to? You don't need to. A lot of times you can just be like, "Bhai, I've written 5 JavaScript files. I will serve them like this." A lot of times you have to be like, "Nee, I'll compress them as much as possible, and just send a compressed version to my end user." A lot of times you have to be like, "I will compress it and also uglify it, so user cannot understand the code by reading through it. I'll also minify it so that it's a very small file." So that is what both of them let you do, unless there's some very big difference. They're from my understanding or my usage of both of them, they both let you both compile. Well, Vite, I don't know if Vite lets you compile backend code, but yes, Build lets you compile both front end and backend code. I was saying end-to-end projects is UX Figma. This guy has really good projects, by the way. We should fix UI UX by either designing Figma using cohort members of. Yeah, I mean, someone did. If I'm being honest, someone created it. It was decent, not great. But this would lead to a lot of contributions. We should first add Storybook. So if you want to take something from this video, but we don't have a monorepo. Yeah, so we need to first add monorepo to Code100x. Then we need to add Storybook to it. Then we can add a designer, and he can create designs, and a lot of people can create components because we have Storybook, and then we'll go from there. The 3 course when I'll just do a quick vibe check. Do people really need it? I think so. Yesterday also in the meetup, 3 hands stood up when we said who knows Web3, who wants to learn Web3 amongst, I don't know, I think there were 1,000 people there. So do you really want a Web3 cohort, or is there too much things? Do you need a Web3 cohort, or it's just like a fatty scheme comes and goes? Okay, I think I asked the wrong question here. Do you need a new Web3 cohort? Not कि इसी में Web3 भी डाल दो for free. I'm saying, does it make sense to add a fresh, will be paid, it's very cheap? Okay, cool. अब कम हो गया percentage. Okay, makes sense. Cool. Yeah, happy to do it. We don't have the time right now, but we'll see at some point, maybe. Yeah, goes up and down very quickly. So by the time the code starts, it might tank also. So if your money is your only motivation, don't learn Web3. If you have to be really strong for multiple bears and bulls, is when you should stay in Web3. Yeah, but yeah, that's my only high level advice. npm run db seed not working. Figure it out. I did not add that change. I did not test it either. So there's a good chance, I saw it felt right, so I just merged it. So there's a good chance, it's wrong. So yeah, try to fix it. How do you write YT scripts? Is there an AI? No. It's the brain, sir. Anytime I'm writing all these slides, Notion provides you an AI. Never used it. It's always, written myself. A word on Devon AI. Yeah, it's easy to build, guys. My next YouTube video is on Copilot. It's basically on a YC company that's built Copilot. So he basically said how Copilot is built. They're building an open source Copilot. Okay, this doesn't seem too difficult. There are some challenges, very specific challenges, but everything else is fairly straightforward. I understand. I can build this. If I knew these 5 jargons that he taught me during that call, he took me through their code base. I was like, sounds code base is in TypeScript. So like, I understand this. Devon is similar, right? It can do code autocomplete. It can do one more thing though. It can talk to itself. Copilot does not. There are iterative calls. I am building a Next.js application. Something broke. So let me fix it. How do I fix this? Another LLM call. This came. Maybe this is the command. I need to run that command. So what is Devon on top of Copilot? It's just something that has access to resources. Something that can talk to itself. So it's not too difficult to build. It's been built in the past. It's just a very good demo that blows your mind, and very good integrations. Okay, it integrates with Vercel as well. It integrates with AWS as well. It's able to open a browser as well. But it's something that was already possible, but someone is creating a very nice plugin system on top, so that whatever an engineer needs, it has. I'm super excited to try it. We have a repo. Someone also created something I did not have the time to test. But a janky version can be built pretty easily. What percentage of the projects need to be Web3 to be considered Web3 hackathon? What does that mean? Your project needs to do Web3 stuff to be able to consider, for you to be able to participate in it. If I'm cloning different repositories which are front end and back end, does it make sense to have turbo repo given the following? A. How will linting work if front end is in Svelte and back end is in Python? Oh, how will linting work? It will not. you no longer need a monorepo that is able to share code. You need a repository that has multiple folders, one Python, one Golang, one something else. Your top level JavaScript folder is a monorepo. Your top level Python folder is a monorepo in itself. So you can have a JavaScript monorepo inside your top level folder, a Python monorepo inside your top level folder. You cannot at your root level have a package.json. Python does not understand package.json. I would not do that. I would create separate folders, and in this case, might as well create separate repositories as well. We have database mod. Okay, TurboRepo only works with JavaScript. You cannot manage exactly. So you cannot. So yeah, in this case, TurboRepo only works if you're using pure JavaScript or TypeScript. What if I want TurboRepo to pull the latest changes from the upstream front end every time I build my application? Can TurboRepo help with that? What if I want TurboRepo to pull the latest changes from the upstream for the front end? Did not get this question. Where is your front end? What changes is it pulling? We have a database model in the backend that we would like to share with the front end in Vue.js. Makes sense. Since there are two different repositories, can I create a GitHub action? Yeah. So what you need in this, you can do that. You can create a GitHub action, or you can create something called a GitHub submodule, subrepo. I'm forgetting submodule. I think, yeah, 99%. So you can get a GitHub submodule, which means your Vue project will have a submodule to another GitHub project, which will be your actual, database models. That way you can use that from that. That is how I have done it. That's the easiest way to do it. What did you suggest? That also sounded pretty good. You can have a GitHub action that continuously pushes to the other repositories. I've done that as well. Yeah, anytime there's a commit here, it pushes an action pushes it to the other repository. Both are very ad hoc-ish, but works approach, which I've seen in production in big companies. When I say end-to-end project, we need a good UI. I get it. We should do it. We should bounty a design for 100 steps, and then. But as I said, there are two prerequisites to that: monorepify, and then add storybook. Let's say I use GitHub submodule, and one of the submodule is in Angular. Now I add another Angular app as a monorepo. Should I use TurboRepo in the two frontends, which may have some common components, but be deployed using different CI/CD? Yes, you can still use them. You can totally have different CI/CD as long as the code is shared. They can, use TurboRepo. CMS is too crowded now. Yeah, I'll try to start to aggressively close issues, I guess. Is this a good system for video transcoding? Backend, signed URL, upload to S3, okay. Event notify to SQS. Lambda function makes baits of 2 tasks from SQS. Makes batches of 2 tasks from SQS. Triggers ECS. Ubuntu WebEx C2. What is this C2 doing over here? This looks right, by the way, theoretically. This is probably the best architecture. Pretty good architecture. Can't think of a single downside here. Signed URL, so that I'm assuming this is the front end. Front end uploads it to S3, which is temporary. Notifies SQS. Then Lambda function triggers an ECS. Can you not connect SQS to ECS directly? I don't know. Maybe you cannot. And if you cannot, then okay, whatever you need here. Basically, an event loop from which ECS auto scales, an event queue, from which ECS auto scales and runs the things that specifically transcoded, upload it to S3 eventually, and eventually hit a webhook that tells the database, okay, this thing has been transcoded. Yes, sounds pretty decent. In DB containers, this thing, is there a good design for? It will scale to 100,000 uploads a day. It will. It will get very expensive. It will scale. Here's how to make it cheap. You cannot. If you're using cloud providers, you cannot make it cheap. Yeah, the only downside here is you're highly dependent on AWS. If AWS does not give you discounts, which is something you desperately need in this case, if you have hundreds and thousands of videos being transcoded every day, this is at least, if I had to guess, $10,000-$20,000 a month, probably more of expenses. So the only downside here is this is cloud specific. So I would make it cloud native by using Kubernetes, very similar idea, very similar constructs. Have a queue, start a pod, but start a pod so that you can very easily move off to your local machines. In case you have a lot of load, you can buy 20 servers and bring those transcoding locally, or start it on DigitalOcean, whatever the cheapest provider is. Yeah, so the only suggestion is make it cloud native. All right, guys, let's call it here. Throat is a little hurt. I don't know, for a while now. But this was fun, and let's do more monorepo stuff tomorrow. I have to call it Good night, guys.